I'm going to start with a question. And don't try to bluff because I may come and ask. How many of you can explain the Pythagoras theorem right now? Please raise your hand and I may come up and ask you. So please don't bluff. I may come down right now. You may want to look around the room at the number of hands raised. Just take a look around the room and it's a moment of reckoning. It's also a moment of realization. 20 years of schooling and 20 years of education and lakhs of rupees. Yeah? Or thousands of rupees. Lakhs actually. Okay. The Archimedes principle? Very bad. Actually, it's not a comment on you, it's a comment on our education system. You know, like somebody else said very beautifully today, it's not you who failed, it's the education system that has failed to reach out to you. But I want to ask another question. How many of you remember the hare and the tortoise? And how many of you remember the thirsty crow? And how many of you remember the monkey and the cap seller? And that's the thing, we were not taught the Pythagoras theorem through the story. And the interesting thing is that you learned the Pythagoras theorem in grade 7th or 8th. You revised it. It's from a time that is not too long back ago. You revised it, rehearsed it for the exam. Some of us even made chits, but we've forgotten it. We never revised the monkey and the cap seller. We never rehearsed the hare and the tortoise, and we never prepared it for any exam question. None of us ever made chits, and it is from a time much, much longer ago. Yet we remember it. And that's the power of a story. We live in an attention deficit world today. We live in a world where we don't remember day before yesterday's headline, but we remember stories. And we live in a world where we are struggling to get a word in with a venture capitalist, to get him to remember our idea. We are struggling to get a word in, foot in the door with a customer and get the customer to remember an idea. If you want stuff to get remembered, if you want anything to get remembered, use stories. Stories lock things in memory. Rote learning, on the other hand, where we mug up and learn things, is forgotten. For those of you, and I know some of you are still wondering, what was the Pythagoras theorem? Maybe this will help. And for some of you, it will still not, because for some of you, it still needs to be explained through a story. We won't do that today, but there's something fundamentally wrong with our education system. We don't teach through stories. We don't learn through stories, but we remember stories. You may have seen Sholay 15 years ago, but you remember Sholay's story. But you don't remember Boolean formula. And in many ways, I started the Storywalas to correct that in a small way. There are two reasons why we started. The first insight that I had is that we don't remember anything that we learn through rote learning, but we remember everything that we remember that we learn through stories, even after years. And the second is that there is a very strong correlation between the subjects we like and the teachers we like. And that correlation is also true for things that we don't, in the sense that the subject that you hated was taught by a teacher that you feared the most. So it's the teacher who can make any subject interesting. And if teachers were storytellers, we would have remembered the Pythagoras. So why not convert all teachers into storytellers? Everybody needs to be a storyteller today. And at some level, what stories do is stories foster imagination. Stories speak to our imagination. And we can experience that, what I mean by that, through a small illustration. Let me tell you a short story. Once upon a time, there was this boy called Rahul. He lived in his house with his mother and father at the end of the village in a small house. And after where the village ended, the forest began. And he had never been into that forest because, he'd been told that it's a very dangerous forest. Don't go there. But today he had a fight with his mother and father over something, some argument. And he decided to show his anger by walking into the forest. And the deeper and deeper he went into the forest, the denser and denser the forest got. And the bigger and more menacing the animals and birds he encountered. I'll just stop here. The Rahul that you saw in your mind and the clothes that he was wearing is very different from the Rahul that you saw. And the forest that you imagined is very different from the forest you imagined. And the birds and the animals that you encountered in the story are very different from the birds and animals that you saw. So you see, when a storyteller tells a story, he is not the only one who's working. Your audience is working, their imagination is working, and they are evoking the images. You are bringing out the images in your mind and completing the picture. And what's childhood without imagination? What's life without imagination? Unfortunately, imagination, and a study on imagination has established that, while imagination is innate ability of human beings, so it cannot go away. It cannot go away, but it is getting rusted because we are using it less and less. And, every decade it is declining. And, the parameters that measure it on is parameters like, innovation, creativity, ability to think in nuanced terms. And that's going down. And that's going down because, the same story, if I had to narrate that story to you in terms of a television story, then you will all see the same Rahul, and all of you will see the same forest, and all of you will see the same birds and animals. There is less to imagine. So when stories are told orally, the way they were told, when people would sit around a fire and tell each other stories, they foster imagination. So when you see a young kid sort of coming up to his dad or mother and saying, "What should I do now? I'm bored. Give me something else." The mother and the father should feel really happy that he is bored or she is bored. Because when you're bored, you do nothing. And when you do nothing, you're forced to daydream. And daydreaming is imagination. Remember the times when we were younger, we used to sit by a window for hours, or sit on the footboard of a train and watch different kinds of landscapes pass by, and we would look at the clouds, and clouds would form different shapes, and we would think, "Arey, ye to yahan ka map hai. Oh, that guy looks like a monster." That's all daydreaming. And that all develops imagination. And that all speaks to the imagination. We don't do that as much as we used to. And that's really unfortunate. And it's linked to our output. Today, what we do, unfortunately, is when children come and ask a question, we say, "Be quiet." When children come and want to say something, we say, "Chup raho." In many ways, Storywalas is born as an answer to that. And I just want to share something that I wrote as an answer to this constant "chup raho, chup raho, chup raho." And it's in Hindi, with apologies to people who don't understand Hindi. I think most of you do here, but essentially it's an answer saying, it's self-explanatory. Maybe you can join me in repeating "chup raho, chup raho, chup raho," because it appears many times. जब हंसता हूँ तो हंसने दो, जब रोता हूँ तो रोने दो. जब हंसता हूँ तो हंसने दो, जब रोता हूँ तो रोने दो. ये भी क्या बात हुई कि जब देखो ये कहते हो कि चुप रहो, चुप रहो, चुप रहो. कभी कभी तो रोता हूँ, कभी कभी तो रोने दो. कभी कभी तो रोता हूँ, कभी कभी तो रोने दो. ये भी क्या बात हुई जब देखो ये कहते हो चुप रहो, चुप रहो, चुप रहो. दो आंसू गिरे नहीं कि कोई आया बहलाने को, कोई आया फुसलाने को, कोई आया आइसक्रीम लेके, कोई आया टॉफ़ी लेके. दो आंसू तो गिरने दो, गाल तो गीला होने दो. ये भी क्या बात हुई कि जब देखो ये कहते हो चुप रहो, चुप रहो, चुप रहो. क्यों क्लास हमारी लेते हो? क्यों क्लास हमारी लेते हो, क्यों लेक्चर हमको देते हो, जब भी रोता पाते हो वहीं शुरू हो जाते हो, इतने बड़े होकर के भी क्यों बच्चों जैसे रोते हो, एंड मच वर्स, लड़का होकर के भी क्यों लड़की जैसे रोते हो। अब कौन इनको बतलाएगा और कौन इनको समझाएगा कि तेंदुलकर भी रोता है और धोनी भी तो रोता है, और 1 रन से मैच हार के विराट कोहली भी रोता है, एंडी मरे भी रोता है, बहुत रोता है, सलमान खान भी रोता है, शाहरुख खान भी रोता है। बड़े बड़े शहरों में ऐसा छोटा मोटा होता है। मैं तो छोटा बच्चा हूँ, मुझको छोटा रहने दो, मैं तो छोटा बच्चा हूँ, मुझको छोटा ही रहने दो, ये तो मेरा बचपन है, बचपन को बचपन ही रहने दो, ये भी क्या बात हुई कि जब देखो ये कहते हो चुप रहो चुप रहो चुप रहो। So, childhoods need to be reimagined, and the role of storytelling in education, the role of storytelling in life, the role of storytelling in business, and in communication needs to be reimagined. Now, I'm going to switch gears and come to something very different in the context of business, in the context of raising funds, in the context of how we operate. And we've been sort of, in the last industrial era and through the entire industrial revolution, last 100 years, we've grown up to believe in the importance of data. We've grown up and sort of, worshipped data and worshipped logic and worshipped science. And I want to share this. Have you heard the name of Masayoshi Son? He is the founder of SoftBank. SoftBank is one of the largest investment companies in the world, and Masayoshi Son is one of the wealthiest persons in the world. He is the guy who's invested in Alibaba.com, Yahoo.com. He's the guy who was in India to invest in Snapdeal.com. And this is how he describes his first meeting with Jack Ma, who's the founder of Alibaba. He says, when I first met Jack Ma, I had already met 20 other entrepreneurs. Everybody else was talking about business models and revenue projections with their charts, with their graphs, with their PowerPoint. But Ma, he spoke about what he wanted to give even the small Chinese businessmen. He talked about his dream. He talked about his story. He talked about what moved him. He talked about his passion. He had no presentation. He just had a scrap of paper. And within 5 minutes of listening to him, I told him, take my money. Not hundreds, not thousands, millions of dollars in 5 minutes. That's how decisions are made in this world, in the real world. In another interview, he said, when he's, have you heard of Jerry Yang? He's the founder of Yahoo. And when same guy, Masayoshi Son, invested in Yahoo, he talks about that. He says, I met Jerry Yang. I looked into his eyes and there was a smell. He says, Jerry Yang was smelling. He says, there was animal smell around him. I invested on the basis of that animal smell. I could sense hunger and passion. That's how decisions are made. And 100 years of industrial revolution has not changed us. We may worship science, we may worship data, but this is also reality. And if you challenge that, I'll just ask you to remind you, I'd just like to remind you about the biggest decisions that you may have taken in your life. What could that be? Falling in love, getting married? They are all taken in data vacuum. You have no data when you take those decisions. Data will come back and hit you every morning after that. But that's real world. That's how we operate. We have primitive brains, and primitive brains respond to stories. Millions of years of conditioning and hardwiring has conditioned the brain to respond to story. So, let's play this game, have you played a word association game ever? Like when I say Amitabh Bachchan, what comes to your mind? Aishwarya Rai? Yeah, so you got that game, right? Yeah, you got that right. Okay, so when I throw the word story at you, what comes to your mind? A book, story book, yes, what else? Illustrations, what else comes to your mind? Any memories, anything else? Peter Rabbit, mother, morals, grandmother, nice, nice, sitting under a tree, pillow, bedtime, yeah, good days, right? See how strong our conditioning is of the word story. That we are all sitting here in this design conference. We paid our money through our nose, not to sort of be transported back to the world of bedtime stories. But our conditioning is so strong that we associate stories to two or three things. We associate stories to children. While that's true, the largest consumers of stories in the world are adults. I'll repeat that. We strongly associate stories with kids, but the largest consumers of stories in the world are adults. We consume stories as video games, we consume stories as movies, we consume stories as the entire book business, we consume stories, thank you. We consume stories as ideology, we consume stories as religion, we consume stories as brand narratives, we consume stories as organizational narratives. We buy into stories all the time. Adults, not children, are the largest consumers of stories. We think stories are not real. They are fantasy, they are fiction, they are the world of make-believe. But some of the most powerful stories that inspire us, that move us, are real stories, are authentic stories. Stories of people like Jeev Milkha Singh, story of Mahatma Gandhi, story of Nelson Mandela. Real stories, real people. And the third mistake that we make is to associate stories with passing time, entertainment. Stories are at the heart of big business today, and stories are what add value, maximum value, to big business. And some of the best businesses are storytelling businesses. So let me sort of take you into that world of storytelling as well, apart from the kiddie world of stories. And see, how we as designers, as design students, thinkers, can leverage that, and what are the challenges, and what are the frameworks we can use. And I'll share some frameworks, and I'll share some principles, and then maybe we'll do some work trying to use that. Yeah? So we'll try not to keep this as a lecture, but we'll try and do some work so that we can start using it. Yeah? But first, what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at this video. And then let's look at what principles are emerging. Let's try and have a conversation around this.
Saying. I wrote the same, but different words. Excellent.
Now, I was talking about how facts don't move people today. Let's not sort of get distracted by whether this is ethical, not ethical, those are distractions here. Let's try to look at the underlying principle here of storytelling. This person is in business. His survival or growth of business depends on convincing people to open their wallets and give him money. He is obviously not doing a very good job of doing that. He is using fact and he is telling the facts. But facts don't move people enough. What he does later, or what the lady does actually, is also not twisting the fact. It's not. She is using fact. There is no dishonesty there. And this is the first principle of storytelling, that, you know, in the world of business storytelling, you can't, or any storytelling actually, in life, if there is dishonesty in your storytelling, it won't take you far. Number one. Number two, so, you know, I have a simple definition for stories. Stories are truth well told. What he was doing earlier was he was telling the truth, but there was no well told. When the truth is told beautifully, it becomes a story. Then it conveys. And what do I mean when I say it becomes a story? Because it achieves the purpose of a story. What is the purpose of a story? The purpose of a story is emotional transportation. What is emotional transportation? You know, I would say there is this guy, he feels some pain. He is not able to communicate that pain to other people. And unless he can get the other people to see things from his perspective, there is no emotional transport happening. So, storytelling is about emotional transportation. If you can see things from my perspective, have you been in that situation where we have felt, why are they not getting it? Eh? You know, I am explaining it so well, but they just don't seem to get it. They don't get it because there is no emotional transportation happening. They are not able to see it from your perspective. You have in your mind imagined a scenario, you have in your mind a business plan, you have in your mind an idea that's so beautiful that it's going to change the world, but the other guy, that panel who's sitting in front of you, is completely unmoved because you've not been able to tell your story. They've not been able to see it. You can see it very clearly that the world in 2020 is going to be very different. This idea that you have is going to change the world. It's going to make lives better for so many people. It's going to make these very investors who are sitting on that panel completely, you know, it's going to multiply their wealth many times over, but they are completely unmoved because they can't see what you have seen. They haven't time traveled like you have time traveled, and you have failed to tell that story. The purpose of all storytelling is emotional transport, getting other people to see things from your perspective. And that's important, no matter which field you operate in. You could be a designer, you could be a politician, you could be a campaigner, or you could be a fundraiser. If you're a fundraiser, you can't raise funds unless the donor can see things from your perspective. We did a workshop with Greenpeace, and Greenpeace is completely, you know, it's a fundraising organization. You've all heard of Greenpeace, and fundraising and individual donors support their activities. We found that, you know, after we trained the fundraising team, we found a very interesting correlation. The fundraisers, when they were able to tell better stories, the ticket sizes of donations increased. Because what Greenpeace is doing is extremely difficult. It's trying to sensitize people about some mining work that is happening somewhere, and tribals are getting displaced thousands of miles away from here. How do I emotionally transport you? You are not even affected. And get you to donate money to that cause. Purpose of storytelling is emotional transport. If you're a leader, political leader, you know, why did Rahul Gandhi fail? He could not make people see his vision. I don't even know if he had a vision. That's another thing. But he could not, if he had one, he failed to make people see how India will be in 2020. That's what Modi did successfully. He got people to time travel with him and see that the India of his dreams was an India with infrastructure, was an India with development, was an India that had a strong backbone while dealing with its neighbors. You could see that. He could communicate that story. So purpose, no matter which field you are in, you could be a designer today, you could be an investor tomorrow. The purpose of storytelling is fundraising. Lock that in. Yeah, and we underestimate the power of stories, just much like we overestimate the power of data. We underestimate the power of stories in our everyday lives. Hugely underestimate the power of stories. Do you know what these images are? Anybody knows what these images are? Yes? Balaji, the richest temple in the world, Tirupati. Who makes it the richest temple in the world? We make it. Why do we go and put money there? Is this, by the way, Balaji is reincarnation of Vishnu, right? Vishnu has 10 major avatars. This is not a major avatar. This is one of the minor avatars, by the way. This is not one of the major avatars. And this is the richest temple in the world. Why is it the richest temple in the world? Why do we put money there? You know the story? Can we give a mic to that lady here? Wait, we'll get a mic to you. It's wonderful. There's only one person in this audience who knows the story. Yeah. Mothers tell stories, grandmothers tell stories. That's how they reach us, right?
So, like he owes money to his wife.
He owes money to his wife. Oh, there's some loss in translation, but he owes money, yes.
Yeah. So we're trying to like.
Why
give
does he
him-
owe money? He's borrowed money.
Yeah, he's borrowed money, and people even donate.
So we are
hair.
helping him.
Yeah, people even donate hair to him because while he was traveling to some place.
Okay, let's help. Vishnu has many avatars, right? So, Ram is an avatar of Vishnu. Parshuram is an avatar of Vishnu. Krishna is an avatar. Balaji is another avatar. But, he's not a major avatar. In this avatar, he is very poor. Very, very poor. Extremely poor. And he has no money. He is a poor cowherd. He is so poor that his house is under an ant hill. He doesn't even have a house. But heart, doesn't look at bank balance. So he falls in love with the princess. The princess, he falls in love and marries the same woman in every rebirth, which is Lakshmi. So in this rebirth, Lakshmi, who's a princess, who's a king's daughter, her name is Padmavati, and he falls in love with Padmavati. And look at the glory days of India. Those days, the guys had to pay a dowry to the girl's father to get married. Now he had no money to pay dowry. That's why he borrowed money. What do we do when we need help? What do gods do when they need help? What do we do in KBC? Phone a friend. So he phones his friend. Who does he call? He's still a god, right? So he calls Kuber, the lord of money, and says, "Man, I have fallen in love. You have to see this girl, man. Look at her hair. Look at her blue eyes. Look at her skin. There is no way that I got to marry her. You've got to help me." And Kuber is like Shylock. When a man is in love, he can't think, he can't read fine print, he does not understand interest calculations. Kuber says, "Don't worry, I'll help you. I'll give you the loan. Just sign this document. Don't read the fine print." Man in love never reads the fine print. He says, "Kidhar sign karne ka hai?" He signs, gets married, goes on a honeymoon, comes back from the honeymoon, and there's a knock at the door. And Kuber is there. "How was it?" "Nice." "All right. Now give me back my money." And then Vishnu says, "What did I sign?" So we are putting money there. We are helping Vishnu repay the interest on that loan. Principal is not yet started. He is still repaying interest on that loan. Now, I ask you this question. Why are we helping him? He didn't read the fine print. He went on a honeymoon. He got married. He took the loan. Why are we helping him? Who is he married to? Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. And goddess of fortune, favors. Lakshmi has to be, Lakshmi in some ways, Devdutt Patnaik says Lakshmi has to be seduced. That's why, when you say seduced, not in the sense of, that you are thinking right now, but, she has to be welcomed. Otherwise, she is not going to come. She favors people, She's the goddess of fortune. So that is why during Diwali we keep the doors open, light the diya. Don't shut the doors at night. Remember your story? Why we don't close the doors? Lakshmi is going to walk in any time. We don't know when. We have to keep pleasing her. So what are we doing? We are helping our husband. Will she not favor us? Such a convoluted story, right? We are helping our husband repay the loan so that the goddess of wealth and fortune will smile on us. I have been brave enough in this room to say such a convoluted story. Outside of this room, if I say that, I can be killed for that. And that's the power of belief. It's ironical. It's a convoluted story, one can say that. On one hand, it's a story. On the other hand, this is the richest temple in India, and that's a fact. It's a story. This is the richest temple in India, and that's a fact. We underestimate the power of story in our lives. Our lives are governed by stories, and we don't know how much. If you think of religion, what's religion but a story? You follow a different story, I follow a different story, or maybe being an atheist is also a particular story. We just don't know which story is true because nobody has come back from dead to tell us which one is true, yours or mine. And it's such a powerful tool that more people have died because of different beliefs and stories than of plague or any other kind of war. That's how powerful story is. We think of stories as entertainment and time pass, and we go to the movies for an escape. 3 years of escape from boredom, 3 years of escape from routine, 3 years of escape from work. I had this friend, he finished his MBA, he finished his engineering from BITS Pilani, and he went, brilliant scientist, he went to the US, he was working in a tech company, he finished his master's there, he did his PhD there, he came back, married his girlfriend from India, went back, got, had a kid. The kid's born in the US, the kid's a US citizen, has another kid, the other kid is also US citizen. And one day he goes for time pass, break from routine, to see a movie. That movie happens to be Swades. And if you remember that movie, in that movie, Shah Rukh Khan plays a NASA scientist, Mohan Bhargava, who comes back to India on a holiday to take his granny back to the US, but the granny sort of just, she's very wise and she's very intelligent. She says, spend some days here, beta. And during that stay, he realizes that essentially in that movie, what is contrasted is he sees the contrast between the world of NASA that runs on autopilot and the world in India that has not changed one bit since he left. The world where even for water and electricity you have to struggle. The world where nothing has changed. And he realizes that what a waste of education to go abroad and waste that. And he comes back to India. Now my friend who was sitting there in that movie hall, watching that movie, the engineer from BITS Pilani who'd done his master's in the US, who'd done his doctoral work in the US, who was a PhD, who was a brilliant scientist working in a tech company, whose two kids were born there, and who was earning a fantastic salary, next day went and quit. These are very big decisions in life. He had an argument with his wife. He had no job. He came back to India. He runs a company called Scan Cafe based out of Bangalore, employing a lot of Indians. Stories can change the course of your life. We underestimate the power of stories in life. So let me share this example with you of a wonderful, beautiful use of storytelling, and then we'll do an exercise. There's this library, a beautiful library in the city of Troy, Michigan. And the Troy library was going under. The year was bad. Tax collections had been poor, and there was lesser money left over to support utilities. But this was no ordinary library. This was a 50-year-old library. People had memories of having spent their childhoods here. Now they would take their kids here. This was an award-winning library, but there was no money. And this had to shut down. Now this could be saved. And you know how much it would take to save it? Very less amount. People would have to increase their tax, voluntarily just by 0.7%. So there was a referendum in August 2011 that people would sort of vote, and if they would vote yes for that referendum, this library could be saved, and you would think everyone would vote right. 0.7%, what's that to save? Such a wonderful library, a library that everybody loves, a library that's an award-winning library where people have huge memories associated with it. But then the city of Troy, Michigan, there was the mayor of that city was from the Tea Party, and if the Tea Party is famous for anything, the Tea Party is famous for being anti-tax, because taxes, that means governments reaching into your pockets and taking out money that belongs to you and putting it into government coffers, and they were completely against it. So they started sending out a message, and they started sending out a story that was anti-tax. And in that entire debate about tax, what was forgotten was the story of that library. How do you save that? You need to craft and weave a different story. See this example? Beautiful one.
There once was a library, a beautiful, busy, award-winning library. Unfortunately, times were hard. The city of Troy, Michigan no longer had enough money for its library, so it scheduled a vote asking the townspeople to approve a small tax increase. This angered an anti-tax group known as the Tea Party. Well organized and well funded, they started posting vote no signs, mailing flyers, and making noise. They dominated the conversation, changing the topic from library, books, and reading to taxes, taxes, taxes. With no money and an election less than a month away, the library needed help. They needed something attention-getting, audacious, maybe even vile. So we decided to form a group of our own and started planting signs around town that said, "Vote to close the library August 2nd, book burning party August 5th. The idea of book burning is bad enough, but gleefully making it a party, well, that angered people enough to send them to our Facebook page.
You people are sick. This is disgusting. Reject the wackos. Vote yes.
But we didn't stop there. We created videos,
Imagine this times 200,000. How cool is that?
posted on Twitter,
Troy Library might be short on money, but it has books to burn.
created items for sale.
A book bag. How ironic.
We placed newspaper ads, created check-ins, posted flyers, and lined up entertainment.
You guys are booking a band?
People became enraged.
Why would you burn books, idiots?
This is horrible.
Cheap imbeciles.
What the is this world coming
We
to?
should burn your signs instead.
Complete and total
This is
idiots.
really
Shut this
just
bitch down.
pathetic.
Jerks.
They posted their own life, shared with friends, debated the merits of libraries and the audacity of burning books. The conversation spread from Facebook to city council meetings, from newspapers to TV. It grew from local to national, even international news. Once it reached a fevered pitch, we revealed the true intent of our campaign. A vote against the library is like a vote to burn books. And people started posting, tweeting, and reporting all over again. In the end, we had changed the conversation completely, from taxes, 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 to library, library, library. And on August 2nd, the yes voters, voters who don't normally turn out to vote, turned out at levels 342% greater than projected. And the library won by a landslide. The town's library, its beautiful, award-winning library, had been saved. Not every story at the library has a happy ending. Fortunately, this one did.
Yeah. So you understand now, what I meant by emotional transport? Getting people to see things from your perspective. And this is what storytelling excels at, is using metaphors. They found a metaphor and they said, or use an analogy. Stories are rich like poetry in metaphors and analogy. And if you go back and see Steve Jobs' videos, all launch conferences, you will see he's the business master of analogies. He finds an analogy, when he has to launch the MacBook Air, which is the thinnest laptop at that point of time. He doesn't bring the laptop, he brings a envelope. He's finding an analogy and he's saying that this is as thin. When he says this is as thin, he is using new vocabulary, because the vocabulary in computers is about thickness. So far, it was all about thickness of screen. So what he was doing was he was changing the conversation from thickness to thinness through the use of analogy and metaphor. And you will find that when we do the exercise, we'll see if we can get you to do some analogy and metaphor work of how to find analogies and metaphors for your business plan, for what you are trying to do, for your design project that you are trying to do. Try to find an analogy. Try to find a metaphor. What are you really trying to do? Is there another way to convey that? Instead of saying this is how thick the screen is, can you establish how thin it is? Can you change the conversation and not necessarily cater to the existing paradigm, but shift the paradigm. Yeah? Let's do this, enough of me talking. Let's do an exercise, turn to the person right of you and form pairs. And this is what you need to do. Once you've paired up with a person, what you need to do is, in 1 minute or 90 seconds, 1.5 minutes, what you have got to do is, you got to tell your partner about the last time you felt proud. It could be either the last time you felt proud, or tell him about any other moment in your life that you felt really proud. And what I want you to think about is, in terms of richness and detail about that moment. How did you feel? What was that day? Do you remember whether it was morning or evening or afternoon? What was the light like? What was the sound like? Who were there? So bring those details alive, and what was the emotion? What was the rasa? Why did you feel proud, and how did you feel? Were you walking 2 feet higher? So, it's that feeling along with why you felt proud. I want you to explain to your partner. Then, then the partner, you tell back, your moment of pride. Yeah. So first you listen to this person, and then you reverse the roles. So you got 1.5 minutes to tell, and then you got 1.5 minutes to tell back. Yeah. Is that clear? Have you found your partners? Let's start now. I know what you're doing right now. You're saying you go first, you go first. So the person on the right goes first now. Five. All done? Thank you. You have the mic here? How was that to share your story with somebody else, and how was it to, I just want to hear some observations. Just reflect on what you've just done, and how did it make you feel? Happy? Proud? Connected? Connections, right? You felt connected. And some of you, I know some of you are really sort of sitting with your friends. But did you know this about your friends earlier? And some of you have known your friends for a long time. And today you discovered something new about your friends? Because your friends told you a story. And we don't tell each other stories, and we think we are very good friends. But when you tell each other stories, there's so much to discover about each other. And this reminds me of an old Buddhist story? Yeah, I think it's a Buddhist story called Two Warriors. And there was this time that, many years ago, that an army was returning from war, victorious, And there was another army that was returning from war, victorious, led by a great warrior, both come face to face. And one of the biggest wars that was fought at that point of time begins. And this war is a war to the end of the armies, right? So everybody gets decimated. Everybody. Not a single survivor except those two great warriors. And these two great warriors are standing alone one evening at the end of the day. Everybody has died. Dead bodies here, dead horses there. And they are surveying this and they're completely exhausted. But it's a war. Only one person can walk back from here. So they say, and they agree, that let's rest for now. Let's fight again in the morning. And only the victor will walk away alive from here. And both of them, tired, exhausted, lie down. And they lie down on their backs. And the sun goes down and the moon comes up and the stars are there. And both of them are looking at the stars. And one guy, he starts talking to the other guy and he tells him about his wife and his kids that he has left back at home, many months ago. And listening to that, the other guy responds and he talks about his father and his mother and his family and where he comes from and how everybody in his family is a warrior and all the great things that they have done and all the great things that they, from all the lands that he has traveled and what are the stories, the journeys from their lands where he has conquered. And this guy responds with more stories and that guy tells stories and the entire night passes, they're just telling stories to each other. They wake up in the morning to resume the fight. But their hands are not able to take the swords and fight each other because they have listened to each other's stories. And once you've heard each other's stories, you can't fight. The world is at war today at many places. What we need to do is to sit down and listen to stories, lie down and look at the stars and trade stories like you traded just now and got to know your best friends a little better. We can get to know strangers a little better if we know their stories and we won't be able to fight them. That reminds me actually of another story. I am a storyteller. I tell a lot of stories and I'm not doing performance storytelling today. We do performance storytelling as well. But that reminds me of another story. There was this TV salesman and his job was to sell televisions. And he went to this place where there were no TVs, but people loved stories. He saw that every evening people would come back from work and they would sit around a fire and they would trade stories and they would exchange stories. And he walked up to them and he said, you guys love stories and here's something. This is the television box. This guy tells stories. You would love this guy. So everybody, every village, every person in that village bought a TV set and he was really happy. This was the best sales deal that he had done in his entire career. Everybody in the village bought a TV. He was very happy and then he moved on from there, having sold a TV to everyone. And then he traveled to many places and after a couple of months, he was traveling back and he happened to pass through that village. And when he was passing through that village, he saw a strange sight. There was one old house and in that old house, all the TVs were stacked on top of each other. And he decided to stop and stay back and he said, let me talk to these people. And in the evening, they all came back, sat around the fire and they were trading stories. And he said, what happened? I thought all of you loved stories. And they said, yes. We do love stories and in the beginning it was good fun, the TV told us many stories. But it would not listen to our stories. And that's not happening these days. We are not sitting and listening to each other's stories. And that's why we are not getting insights. We are not getting insights into the consumer and that's why our design is not right. There's something, one of the biggest reasons why startups fail is not just because they don't have enough money or because they don't build the right team. One of the biggest reasons, and I think he mentioned that as the third reason, when he was talking, one of the biggest reasons why businesses fail is because they don't have a good insight. They haven't been listening. So let's do some detective work now, let's go story spotting and figure out what are stories. Because if we need to become good storytellers, and I think everyone needs to become a good storyteller, then let's try and figure out what are stories. Yeah, what's a story apart from truth well told? Magic. Yeah, it is magic. Yes. In structural terms, what is story? What is central to story? What is at the heart of a story? Emotion, plot, beginning, middle, end. Beginning, middle, end. Oh, even a rope has a beginning, middle, and an end. What is at the heart of a story? Plot, description. At the heart of a story is problem, conflict. If you don't have a conflict, there is no story. I will say that again, and you may want to write that down. If there is no conflict, if there is no problem, there is no story. What story does is it resolves conflicts, and in that way, that's what it's similar to what designers do. It's similar to what good business does. Good business resolves conflicts. Good business solves problems. If there is no problem, there is no story. Let me explain that. Boy loves girl, girl loves boy. Mama Papa says, very good, get married to each other. They get married to each other and live happily ever after. Have you seen that movie? Nobody's seen that movie. Boy loves girl, girl loves boy, and Papa says, nahi, ye shaadi nahi ho sakti. That's the beginning of that story. Without conflict, there is no story. Now, without conflict or without identifying a problem, there is no business idea. In that sense, story and business are structurally very similar. They resolve conflicts. Of course, there is a character. The character, goes through a journey, struggles, and eventually the problem is resolved. I am using the word resolved and not solution because there can be tragic resolutions. You remember Ek Duje Ke Liye? Tragic resolution. Business also has tragic resolutions. Companies fold up. Enron. Tragedy. So tragedy is not just, Shakespeare is not the only one who writes tragedies, There are business people also who script their own tragedies. By not identifying a big, good business idea, by not caring for customers, or by not following ethical business practices. Then you will have nothing but a tragedy. So let's get comfortable with this structure, okay? I'm going to share some stories. What I want you to do is I want you to do this detective work and tell me what is the conflict in this story, okay? I'm going to share some examples. I want you to identify and articulate the conflict.
Imagine me and you and me. No matter how they toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me. So happy together. I can't see me loving nobody but you for all my.
What's the conflict? Share or not? What's the conflict? No, that's a conflict, whether to share or not. Somebody said beautifully when I was in a workshop like this, he said, beer or girl? Same, just articulated. Remember the first video, Power of Words. In life, you will reach a fork when you will not know whether to go right or turn left. And there will be a Dharam Sankat. This is that Dharam Sankat. And this is, and to make it an interesting Dharam Sankat, this is no ordinary girl. Right? This is one of the most beautiful women in the world. This is Jennifer Aniston. But if you're an alpha male, if you're a man's man who loves football, who loves beer, who's she? Right? That's the resolution of the story. How would somebody else resolve the same conflict? Same conflict.
ये कुछ क्या
in structural terms, the conflict is the same. The next chapter of my life for this girl, if I was this girl, the next chapter of my life comes at the cost of the current chapter of my life. I have to choose between parents or boyfriend. And it's not a choice that I want to make. But in the earlier example, the choice is resolved in favor of the bear. It's either or. Here, the choice is not either or, it's and. You don't have to choose either or. You can have both. It depends what's your brand narrative, how you are going to resolve the same conflicts. So what's your narrative? What's your aesthetic sensibility? What's your story? What's your lens? What's close to your way of resolving conflicts? And you'll find that, conflicts may be similar. And there may be, 3 architectural firms will resolve the same conflict of low-cost housing, but they will do it differently because they will all have different lenses. This is a lens in a story structure. What lens are you using to resolve the... So 3 design firms or 40 design firms may work on the same challenge, but it's important that you have your own signature lens. Otherwise, you don't have a great story. All stories use this formula, all stories, they have a problem and you resolve the problem. So 2 states, it's the classical sort of love story problem with a father saying, nahi, ye shaadi nahi ho sakti, and then, how it gets resolved. Lagan is another problem that gets resolved of people who don't know how to play cricket, they can get away and not pay tax, but they have to beat the guys who invented cricket, right? And Chak De, the central conflict is that, the team members, they don't play as a team. They are playing for individual glory. And the moment they start playing as a team, the problem gets resolved in victory for the Indian women's hockey team. So stories are about resolving conflict. So let's do this. All of you on your tables, otherwise, just, if there are 4 of you, just team up as 4 of you. Just find 3 other people to team up with in the row that you are sitting or on the table that you are sitting, and make sort of teams of 4 each. And let's practice the story structure. Start with a character. So the first person on the table, who's sitting on the leftmost, you start with a character and don't add a problem yet. Yeah, you just say that there is this guy, and all stories don't begin with sort of murder. Stories begin with sort of when life is good and everything is going on normal, and then the problem gets introduced. Second person, introduce the problem. Third person, make the problem bigger. That's how it happens in real life. The problems always get bigger. That's why we have escalation managers. And the fourth person, resolve. And it can be any kind of resolution. Happy, not happy, doesn't matter. But you need to resolve the problem. Yeah, let's do have you understood this, or do you want a live demonstration? A live demonstration would be, to get a team on the stage. So can I request 4 of you to come on the stage, and we can do this live. Like right now, we'll create a story. Yeah, in 1 second. You don't need to prepare. Come on. All 4 of you. And I need a mic. Yeah. A hand mic. And then each one of you is going to do that real time. Yeah, you don't need to prepare. So, any of you who's thinking that what will I say first, I've got to go first, I'll change the sequence now. Come up on the stage. So the first person who goes, just introduces the character and something that happens every day, right? So you start with something that happens every day, like, Rahul was sitting in his balcony and having his cup of chai, reading the newspaper like he does every day. And the second person adds a problem by saying, when suddenly. That's a simple trick. Then you add a problem and then say this happened. And the third person makes the problem even bigger, right? So when suddenly a snake fell into his cup of tea. And then the third person makes the problem bigger by saying, his wife comes and says, mother-in-law coming and staying with us for 3 months. Or something like that. And the fourth person then resolves the problem. Which problem? That you have to think about. What is the bigger problem? Yeah? So, clear?
Yeah.
So,
Start the story.
start the story. I'm going to change the sequence. Yeah? Start the story, add the problem, make the problem bigger, solve the story. Solve the problem.
Just the character.
Just, yeah. Start with something that happens every day, usual.
Once there was a fat boy who couldn't dance.
You've added the problem already.
Because you said there's a.
Once upon a time, there was this guy. He was really little chubby, and he was really nice. He was jovial. Let her add the problem.
One day he just sees this beautiful girl who can dance very well, and she's looking for a partner. He falls in love. Okay.
He falls in love, but he can't dance with her.
Yeah, he falls in love, and she loves to dance. She's such a beautiful girl. Now he doesn't know what to do.
Yeah. Make the problem bigger.
And the girl is married.
You see, this is fundamental to storytelling, In Qayamat Se Qayamat Tak, the problem is not that Juhi Chawla and Amir Khan love each other. The problem is that their families are at war, and to escalate it, then somebody goes and kills somebody. So that if you had any hope that you could marry each other, now the problem is even bigger. And that's how life is. Real life is, when it rains, it pours. Now resolve it.
Okay. I don't mean to insult anyone or something, but the guy dances with the girl's husband instead, and then he falls on him, and the guy is injured so badly. And during the whole hospital visit, the wife and the guy, they fall in love. So they get married.
Nice. So you all, wonderful. Let's clap for them. Wonderful team. Yeah. It's not that difficult to master business narrative, by the way. We've done this exercises at companies with business narrative, and then, somebody starts by saying, it was the day of the presentation. Like every day, this was or like, one of those regular sort of quarterly reviews. We were there for the presentation. We were all warming up, we were taking backups. The team was on the way to the presentation venue. And then the second guy sort of adds, then suddenly. And then you add a problem. That's a real problem that, everyone faces. When you're in a design team working together, the key designers sort of, happens to fall ill on that particular day. And then you escalate it, because when he falls ill, that's the day that, where you realize that he has all the backups with him. Nobody else has the backups. And he was the guy who was supposed to present it. And then the fourth guy has to come up with a resolution. So let's do that right now in the next 60 seconds. Let's do these stories. It didn't take them more than 60 seconds to do that story, right? So the guy on the extreme right starts the story, second person adds the problem, third person makes it bigger, fourth person resolves it. Okay, 90 seconds. I have found this is usually the most fun part of the workshop, where people sort of do this, and I can see people laughing and having fun at the kind of stories they've created. Now I want you to pull you back to the world of your presentations. All of you write presentations, right? All of you make business plan presentations. Most of you do business plan presentations, idea presentations, design presentations. Thank you. So all of us do business presentations. But we forget to keep the problem that we are solving at the heart of the story. At the heart of the story is the problem that you're trying to resolve. If you can show that problem, what is the problem your design project is solving? And then you show your struggle, and then you show your resolution. That's a very engaging story. A little while, actually, if you've been paying attention to the stories that all the entrepreneurs have come and shared, all the design masters have come and shared, the underlying structure is exactly the same. There's a character, Kamal Sagar, passes out of college. There's a struggle. There's a problem. and there is a resolution to that problem. And the resolution is to do what nobody does, is to put design and construction within, and that's your solution. And that's how you resolve that. If you look at Paper Boat, it's a story, it's a journey. And it's the journey of a person who craves for that taste and that authentic taste. But there's a problem. How do you resolve that conflict? Going back to the roots and sourcing from the same place sources, and with that authenticity and bringing that back is when you have that connection. Right? So business narratives are no different from the simple exercises that you have just done. It uses the same principles. When you go back home, just take the same principles back and apply it to all your stories. You will be a master storyteller. This is the same framework, by the way, that is used by all master storytellers in all movies and all novels and all plots, all religions. Take Christianity, for example, it's the same story structure, 3-line story structure. Once upon a time, everything was well. Adam and Eve were innocent. Then, one day the serpent came and said, "Psst, bite the apple," introduce the problem. Make the problem bigger. When you bite the apple, you become aware of shame. You lose innocence. Resolution, the life that we are leading. If we lead it according to the tenets of the Bible, we will go back to heaven and be innocent again. Otherwise, the cycle continues. The cycle continues is the same story in the rebirth cycle in Hinduism. All great stories, and these are stories that have stood the test of time, hundreds of thousands of years, right? Use the same structure. Now you have that plot device in your hands. Go out and tell those stories. Now that you are storytellers, let's do some detective work. Let's do story spotting. Yeah? So I'm going to tell you the story, and we will do a live sort of interaction and see, if you are a good story detective now. Now that you got the formula, I want to see if you can read story not at surface, but at a structural level. It's like seeing, not interface design, but when you see interface design, you should be able to read the code behind that. What's the structure? Yeah? That's the metaphor. So let's do this. I'm going to tell you the first story in the world. You know what's the first story in the world? Anyone who knows that? There's a special prize for that. Anyone who knows the first story in the world? Adam and Eve is not it's a mythological. I'm talking about real story. The science has established as the first story. No one? Okay, I get the prize. The first story in the world, and there's a story behind that. The year was 1839, and there was a British explorer. His name was Henry Austin Layard, and in those days, people were mapping the world, right? So people were going from one place to another and trying to find sort of, like the Silk Road, etc., right? So people were, trying to map the world, and Henry Austin Layard wanted to go and find a route to Ceylon, present-day Sri Lanka. And when he and his team reached present-day Iraq, Mesopotamia, his curiosity was aroused by strange mounds that he saw in the desert. And he told his men, "Chalo khodo, start digging." And people started digging, and what they didn't realize then, but soon, is that they had chanced upon one of the most important discoveries in human civilization, the biblical city of Nineveh, older than Mohenjo-daro. And then the archaeologists came and they cordoned off the area, they started digging, and they found, what you usually find at sites like this. They found some weapons, they found some utensils, and they also found these stone tablets. And on those stone tablets, there was something written in a strange cuneiform script. And then now they called in the linguists, the language experts. And the language experts came, and they took a couple of years to decipher the language. And there were a lot of these stones scattered all over the site. When they understood the language, they put all the stones together. This was a story in a poem form. And now you can carbon date it. So they carbon dated it, and they found it to be 5,000 years old. The first ever story in the world, scientifically, carbon dated, present in a museum today. It's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. And this is the story, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And this is a simple story. The kingdom of Uruk has fallen under the terrible shadow of a great and mysterious evil. The source of the threat is traced all the way to a monstrous figure, Humbaba, who lives half across the world at the heart of a remote forest. Our hero is Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh, nobody is willing to fight him. He's, such a big monstrous figure, nobody has the courage to fight him. But our hero Gilgamesh rises to the challenge. He goes to the armorers, and armorers equip him with special weapons. To fight such a big monster, ordinary weapons will not do. You need special weapons. So he gets special weapons, a great bow and a mighty axe, and then he sets out on a long, hazardous journey to Humbaba's distant place, where he comes finally face to face with the monster. And then they embark on a titanic struggle, and against such a powerful force like Humbaba, there is no way that Gilgamesh can win. In fact, he's about to lose his life when at the nth minute, just at the sort of in the nick of time, with the help of his special weapons and his superhuman force, he is able to kill Humbaba and save the world and return home and marry the king's daughter. Does it sound familiar? 5,000 years passed. 5,000 years passed, and the year was 1960, and like we make movies out of Chetan Bhagat's books, right? When books start selling well, we make movies. So in Hollywood, they've been doing that for a long time. When books start selling really well, they make movies. So there was this book series, and it started selling like hotcakes, and they said, we must make a movie on this. If the books are so popular, the movie will do really well. The author's name was Ian Fleming, and the series was called... So the first movie was called Dr. No, and this is the story of Dr. No. The Western world has fallen under the shadow of a great and mysterious evil. The source of the threat is traced to a monstrous figure, the mad and deformed scientist Dr. No, Humbaba, who lives half across the world in an underground cave in a remote island. The hero James Bond, in every movie, before he goes on an expedition, goes to the armorers, who give him special weapons, like a watch that's going to blow up like a bomb, etc., etc. And he sets out on a long and hazardous journey to Dr. No's headquarters, where he finally comes face to face with the monster. In every Bond movie, when the villain comes face to face with James Bond, he takes him on a conducted site visit to show him where the explosives are, where the jails are, where all the dangerous things are, where is that switch to the nuclear button, all that, so that he can come and blow that up later. And after a series of taunting exchanges, they embark on a titanic struggle faced with an adversary with such great power, Bond cannot possibly win. In fact, he's about to die, but finally in the last minute, at the nth sort of minute, in the nick of time, by a superhuman feat and with the special weapons, he is able to kill Dr. No and return back and not marry the king's daughter. We sometimes get irritated and sort of, when children want to listen to the same story again and again. For 5,000 years, we've been listening to the same story, 26 James Bond movies. And if you remember Shan, we had 3 James Bonds, that was our adaptation. Amitabh Bachchan, Shashi Kapoor and Shatrughan Sinha. Exactly the same story. Shakal, Humbaba, Mogambo, Humbaba. Exactly the same story. In fact, people have said that there are only 7 stories in the world. Experts who research stories, they've said there are some 7 basic plots, or 8 or 10 or 20 basic plots, and essentially we retell the same story again and again and again. It just comes back to you in a fresher lens. In many ways, when we solve design problems, the problems are old. They have been there for many times. What we find is a new lens through technology, through design, through the coming together of technology, design, user interface, consumer insight, and we are telling a fresh retelling of an old story. So now that you are detectives, tell me what's common between these two. Connect these two. Yes, the girl who knows her stories, speak out loud, and I'll repeat so that everybody can hear. Can somebody get her a mic, please? Okay, speak out loud so that I can repeat to the audience quickly. Both of them didn't live with their parents. Wonderful. Let's clap for her. Both of them didn't live with their parents. Second connection. Yes. Huh? The boy who survived and lived, both of them survived. 8 brothers or sisters of Krishna, 8 brothers of Krishna, 7 brothers of Krishna who preceded were killed. And that's why we celebrate Janmashtami. He survived. And Harry Potter, his parents were killed. This guy survived with a scar on his forehead. Yeah? Both did extraordinary things, yes? Yes, that lady there, yeah. Both the villains knew that these guys are going to be the cause of their death. Wonderful. Kans, right? He's the villain, right? And who's the villain here? Voldemort. Kans and Voldemort, same. Both of them had foreboding that, the 8th son of Janki and Vasudev, right? Janki and Vasudev will be the cause of my death. And the son of these 2 wizards will cause my death. Both of them. Did the children know anything? That there is a villain whose life is threatened by me? Did the children have any idea whatsoever? Absolutely no idea. Any other connection?
Both were in some or the other way connected or related with the villain, like both the heroes.
Both of them were connected with the villain, and through both of them had a connection with that villain. Yes, that person at the back. Shout out your answer. Both of them killed the villain. After a long time, so there's a long struggle that, both of them killed the villain after 17 years. Both had, both had a tremendous fan following. Both had a tremendous female fan following. Did they know that they were gifted when they were kids? They had no idea that they were gifted. And did the world know that they were gifted? The world had no idea that they were. Both of them grew up with foster parents. Both of them were brought up by foster parents. And then they had no realization for a very long time that they were special. How did they come to the realization, and how did the world come to know that these are no ordinary kids? How did they come to know? Krishna killed the snake. Kalia the Nag. Harry Potter, snake. 5,000 years apart, the same story. Harry Potter, Balkrishna, same story. As storytellers, now I am not at all suggesting that, somebody has gone and copied that story, but you're using the same structure. As a storyteller, you dip into the common pool of stories, because there's very few stories. There are only 7 stories. They're retold again and again, and you're finding a fresh lens. Now that you know that game, let's play that game quickly. Qayamat se Qayamat tak, tell me the next story. Exactly similar. Ram Leela, wonderful. Ishaqzade, wonderful. Exactly the same story. Ek duje ke liye. Exactly the same story. Which story is that? Laila Majnu, Shiri Farhad, Romeo and Juliet. Before Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet, there was Laila Majnu. There was Shiri Farhad. It's exactly the same story. It's the tragic love story. The same stories get retold again and again. Find me a connection between these two. Now you know, they are both Hamlet. They are both Hamlet. What's the Hamlet story? That there is a king, he has a son, the king's brother covets the throne, and he also covets the king's wife, right? And then the king's evil brother conspires with others to overthrow the king, and then the little young son sort of goes away and grows up, like Shahid Kapoor grows up in Delhi, and this young Simba grows up away from this kingdom, and they both come back. Lion King, a retelling of Shakespeare. Same story. Yeah? So what have I done just now? I have just infected you with the story virus. Now you will never be able to go and enjoy a movie. Because you will be always looking and saying, what is this plot? Ye kaun sa device hai? What structure is being used here? Yeah? So now tell me, one of the best storytellers from our times, from the present times, a designer with no formal design education, a storyteller with no formal storytelling education. Steve Jobs, this is his first story that he told. The first ever story that he told before he came and did all those launch conferences. When he launched the first MacBook, not the MacBook, the Macintosh, first ever. This is the story he told. I want you to identify what is the plot, because he is retelling a very old story. We all retell old stories. So what is the story he is telling? The words are not important here.
Anniversary of the information purification directives. You have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of very contradictory thoughts. Our unification of thoughts is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
Which story is he telling? George Orwell? Yeah, that's a bonus. That's the cherry on the cake. But even if those who don't know the George Orwell reference, they will still enjoy the story because it's leveraging some other story. I'll tell you about the George Orwell story that my friend here is talking about. He's absolutely right, and wonderful sort of identification here. Let's clap for him. But the larger story that he's referencing is not that. He's just ending with a reference to George Orwell. So what's the story that he's referencing? What happens in the story? What happens in the story? There is this big godlike guy on the screen, and he's think about the color that is there. It's faded, but there is a color and there is a clue there in the color. And then he is controlling the people. He's saying some mumbo jumbo. Everybody is mindlessly doing what he's saying. And then who comes? Who's that guy? It's a metaphor. Who's that guy? Hitler. Yes, that's a good metaphor. Hitler, people who are autocratic. Who's that guy? Who was Steve Jobs' enemy? IBM, big blue, like Hitler, autocratic, telling people, remember that slide that you saw in the morning that, in the beginning only, 1 or 2% people in the world know how to use computers. That if you had to use computers, you had to be that 1 or 2% population of the world who had to know those languages. You had to be able to go to DOS, DOS, and start up a computer. And there was no Excel. There was something called 1, 2, 3 in which you will compute. It was very difficult. And that was the enemy. That the enemy who said that, who controlled your people, who controlled the people and said, if you want to use computers, you'll have to do it on my terms. That big brother. And who fights that enemy? Lady. Why lady? Conscious choice. Design. Feminine. What is she wearing? Red and white, colors of apple. White from inside, red from outside. Very strongly coded communication. What does she do? And that's the story. What is she doing? Which story is she telling? David versus Goliath. In 1984, Steve Jobs told Apple, you are the Goliath, I am the David. I have this slingshot called design, I am going to bring you down. It took him many years. But look at the audacity of that storytelling. You are nothing, you are launching a computer. And he's laying out his dream and he's telling his competitor, this is what I am going to do. I am going to bring you down. He's telling that story, and in telling that story, he's leveraging an old story, David versus Goliath, the slingshot. He is using the slingshot. So look for metaphors and look for analogies. What is the business that you're doing? What is the problem you are solving? And there are hundreds of powerful stories. Those stories are embedded here. Can you leverage those metaphors for your business? So let's do that kind of an exercise and see, how you can leverage that metaphor and how to get to the heart of that problem. Here's a simple framework that I learned at Ogilvy, the ad agency that I spent some time on. They called this the big ideal. They said the one way to get to the heart of your story is to do this. You know, if you're a designer and you're working on a design project, say for you, or for your design project, if it's called ABC Sutra, or if it's called XYZ, whatever, for you, the world would be a better place, and the world could be Pune, the world could be the world of poor people, the world could be India, the world could be, if you're designing for women, all the women in the world would be a better place if, and then go and complete that sentence. And when you do that, you are identifying who's your enemy. Every story has to have a villain. So identify your villain. What's your villain? Let me give an example. Dove, for example, says that their enemy is artificial notions of beauty. And they say our enemy is artificial notions of beauty. The big problem that we are solving is every morning, millions of women around the world wake up and they look themselves in the mirror and they feel very unhappy. They don't feel happy at what they see because the world of fashion, the world of glamour, the world of journalism, the world of sports illustrated paints a very artificial notion of what is beautiful, and it says that's beautiful. And when we celebrate that notion of beauty, which is photoshopped, which is liposucted, which is surgical, which is operated upon, we, normal people don't feel good about the natural us that we see in the mirror. And Dove says that's the enemy. And that's what, I'm going to fight. And they do that with their stories. Yeah, so you should be able to clearly see who your villain is and what your idea is and what's your story. So let's do this exercise. Use that framework and for yourself write for your design idea. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a designer, if you're working on a design project, use that framework and write, for me, the world would be a better place if. For this design idea, for, if you're representing a company called XYZ, for me, tell your story. What moves you? Who's your enemy? Who are you fighting? Write that down. What's the problem you're solving? The world would be a better place if. You can do that for any kind of business, Paper boat. The world would be a better place if people could rediscover the taste of their childhood, the memories of their childhood in the kind of food that we used to eat, which is no longer available in bigger cities. Total environment, if you could, without leaving the city and the urban landscape, if you could bring nature back into our homes and a sense of aesthetic back into our homes. So for your business, for your agency, for your consulting company, for your architectural firm, for your project team, for your Kickstarter idea, the world would be a better place if you can articulate that. You'll find that every Kickstarter idea that gets well funded, and there are, for every one idea that gets funded, well funded, there are hundreds that don't. It's a communication challenge. And the ideas that get communicated well get well funded because they are able to cause emotional transport. And they are able to explain how is the world going to change because of what we're going to do. And people see your dream and they say that's very unique and that's very interesting and that's not different from my dream. In fact, I also believe that world should be like that, and if my idea of the world is similar to your idea of the world, I will support you. And that's how projects get funded. Have you written that down? Okay, here's what you need to do now. Turn to your partner and explain what your dream is. Turn to your partner and just share that. Read out that sentence. And then, let your partner read that back to you. And read her sentence back, his or her sentence back to you. Done that? Now this is what I want you to do. Have you told your partner what your dream is? Has your partner told you what your dream is? Okay, now this is what I want you to do. Your partner, shared with you his or her big ideal. Now make it your own. And in first person, as if that was your story. Tell it back to your friend. Your friend's story. Tell it back to your friend in first person, as if it's your story, as if it's your dream. And you, whose story it is, listen to it from somebody else's mouth and see how that sounds. How does it sound when your story comes back to you from somebody else's perspective? They may use different words. How was it? How was it to listen to your idea from somebody else? Did it sound good? Did it sound exciting? Did it sound earth-shattering? Did it sound like it can change the world? Did it sound good enough? Did it sound like something that you would want to put your money on? That's the acid test. When your friend tells you back your own idea, does it sound convincing? Would you put money in that Kickstarter project? If it was a Kickstarter project, and if you got that right, you are a good storyteller. Clap for yourselves. Now you got the framework. Now you got the design of storytelling. Now you know the structure. There are enough problems in the world, and all problems are good opportunities. So go and fix those problems, but don't just fix those problems. Tell beautiful stories, because problems don't get fixed alone these days. We need to collaborate. We need people backing us. We need an army. No general has won a war all by himself. Today, we are faced with huge problems of inequities. We are faced with huge problems of intolerance. We need a lot of people behind all kinds of design ideas. When you tell your stories to other people, you will have voters voting for you. You will have backers. You will create a movement rather than a company. So tell those stories and create that movement. And remember, there's a reason why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. All storytellers know this, that there will be no storytellers if there weren't listeners. The biggest skill that a storyteller has is listening. Listen well, you will get your stories. And listen well, you will get your insights. Everybody creates by listening. Oh, I've just said something really nice. Everybody creates by listening, and I'm using listening in a general sense here. An artist creates by listening or observing. Somebody who draws horses, he knows how a horse looks in motion versus how a horse looks while standing, and how the horse's eyes look when the horse is running versus standing still. You observe, then you create. A stand-up comic observes everyday life, then he creates the material. As a designer, listen, and you will get your material, you will get your insights, and then tell the story. You'll get the backers. You will not have a design idea. You will not have a project. You will have a movement. Let me end with one story so that you remember, when you have to convince people, what to convince people with. There will always be data and there will always be facts. A long time ago, that's how stories begin, right? Once upon a time, there was an old man. And wherever that old man went, he had a long white beard, very interesting jacket with lots of pockets there, a long coat. And wherever that old man went, people would call out to that old man and say, "Hey, old man, come and spend some time here." You know, old man, come and sit with us, have some tea, coffee with us, have some wine and cheese with us. Everybody loved the old man. Everybody wanted to invite him. And the old man would visit everyone and make everyone happy. At the same time in the world, there lived a woman. And wherever that woman went, people would shut their doors and windows and people would turn her away. And she was naturally very upset. She goes to this old man and says, why is it, old man, that wherever you go, you are welcomed and I am turned away? Who are you? The old man just shrugs his shoulders and says, I am story. Who are you? And the woman says, I am truth. You see, nobody likes to see the truth, but the old man has the wisdom to know that the world requires the truth. It just doesn't like to see it in its present form. So the old man says, the world needs you. Why don't you come along with me? And there is far more hospitality than I need. There is far much food than I need. Why don't you come along with me? And I can share that with you. And you know what truth did? Truth jumped into Story's pocket. From that day, wherever Story goes, you can find truth. Thank you. May each one of you be a wonderful storyteller, be a wonderful designer. But remember, if you use stories well, you will not have design companies, you will have movements. Thank you.